Today's Sober Friends podcast is brought to you by Mitzi, Caleb, and Angie Mack. Mitzi bought us 1 coffee. Caleb bought us 5 coffees. Angie, holy cow, bought us 10 coffees. Mitzi decided to become a member of buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.com, where Mitzi's going to give us a little scratch every single month because it's important for the new guy and gal to hear this stuff. And it does cost us a little bit of money, which we're happy to front. But Angie, Caleb, Mitzi, we're so grateful that you thought that this was important enough to help us out, to help put this podcast in the ear of somebody who really needs it. I'll tell you, Angie is somebody who I think keeps Sober Friends Pod alive on Facebook. Not a big following there, but Angie is there every single podcast. We are so grateful to Angie, Caleb, and Mitzi, who went to buymeacoffee.com/soberfriends. Why? Because it's important to get this into the new guy or gal's ears. I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. I was a little salty today, Steve. Actually, I was quite a bit salty today. And I had to set some boundaries up with some people. There is this tendency at work where I have people who kind of come out of the woodwork about 5 to 10 minutes before it's time to log off, and they start asking me for things. Some of these people have other leaders who I don't know where they are, but they all come to me because I'm America's supervisor at work. I can send me your poor, send me your tired, and at 3:30, somebody popped up who doesn't belong to me and said, I know you're about to log off, but I just need you to do something real quick. And you know what my response was?
What's that?
I restarted my computer and I walked away.
Yeah, those boundaries are tough. There's a great follow on TikTok. I don't even know if I follow this person anymore. They would talk about this exact situation. How do you handle this stuff? Mostly in a work situation, right?
Yeah.
How do you handle this when people are asking me to do something? And this content provider would go into like, this is how you should handle it. This is how you say it in a nice professional way. So yeah, I get that. Boundaries are always important. Boundaries are hugely important in your sobriety, hugely, especially early sobriety. The boundaries I had to set in early sobriety were really, really strict for me. They had to be, right? I mean, I had to change everything early sobriety in order to survive those really early times of cravings and obsessions and still dealing with all the emotional baggage and not having alcohol to hide those emotions. I had to set up some really, really stringent boundaries with people, places, and things, you know? So yeah, it's a great thing to talk about. It's a great thing that we all have to go through.
I don't know if I'm great at this, mostly because I have a hard time explaining where I would be good at it, although I think I do this quite a bit. I had to set the boundary tonight. Mark from Recovered reached out, hey, can you jump on and do Recovered Cast tonight, which I like to do. It's good promotion for this show. It's a big podcast. It's important. It's been around forever. I said no. Right. I had to take my daughter to soccer practice. I had to set that boundary.
Yeah.
So I think the boundary thing also ties into priorities. What's important,
yep.
What's not important, and what are that level of importance. I have a friend who reached out and said he's co-parenting now. He got a divorce a couple of years ago, and one of his kids is rather young, and they have one of those plans at work, at school, where they have accommodations for anxiety and that type of stuff. I have a daughter who's on one of these plans for dyslexia and for anxiety. And they're important. If you don't get them, you can't push the school around to say, I need this, this, and this for my kids. They need both parents' signature. His ex is in the Dominican Republic for the week, and she's not responding to any emails. And he is not happy. I wouldn't be happy. I'd be pissed.
Right.
I would be livid. That's a priority to me. If there's something to do with the plan for my daughter, I drop everything, no matter what.
Those are important things. Like you said, a lot of priorities, which is what I said, right? So early sobriety, if you're listening, if you're new to sobriety, if you're trying to figure out if you need some help with sobriety or getting sober, some of the things, I'll talk about some of the things that I had to do. But one of the big things that happened to me when I relapsed, when I came back, which is really when I found this program in an honest way, is that one of the spiritual awakening moments for myself, the spiritual shot, whatever you want to call it. Some people call them God shots. And I was about 2 weeks newly sober. I really was very full of my own ego. I was cocky.
I
tell the story. I tell the story when I came back to my Friday night meeting. I was really cocky. Hey, hi guys, I'm back. Look at me, I'm back. I was very, very cocky. But anyway, we had a party scheduled. About 2 weeks in. It was already scheduled. We had about 20 people. I forget, probably a birthday party celebration or something. I forget exactly what it was. There were about 20 people in our backyard, and my kids, my wife's kids, friends, all that kind of stuff. And when I finished up my drinking, I was drinking wine just like my wife because I was trying to hide it from her. And so this party's going on, and I go in the fridge for something, and I open up the doors in the fridge, and there's 2 bottles of wine sitting there. And it just shook me to my bones. I had a panic attack, and I talked about it before, and I went to my bedroom. I called up a couple of guys I knew in the program, and my wife came in and said, hey, what's going on? I told her, and what she said to me was, would it be better if we got all the alcohol out of the house, right? And I said, yes. And that night, after everybody, and I made it through that night. She took every bit of alcohol that was in the house, and there was quite a bit, put it in a laundry basket, and put it in the trunk of her car. And I never saw it again. I never saw any of that alcohol. And that was one of the boundaries I had to do. Like, there could be no alcohol. Now, today, there can be alcohol in my house.
Right.
But back then, there could be no alcohol in my house. I couldn't hang out with certain people. I couldn't hang out with family members because everything they did was around alcohol. So one of my siblings, I could not go over their house because it's like, hey, come on over for some pizza. Brian's going to make pizza on the grill. And I've said it before on this podcast. It was just an excuse to drink, maybe eat a little bit of pizza. But the big part of that whole deal was drinking, not pizza.
Right.
So I had to step away. I had to set those boundaries for me to be safe. All of those things I can do today. None of those things. But at that time, my priority was getting sober and staying sober, which it still is today. So if any of those things bother me, then I won't do them or I'll leave them. But it's very different today.
That's the number one boundary if you're brand new. At the minimum of that pyramid, the foundation is whatever it takes to be sober and to stay sober, that's what you do. And it means that if you have to leave somewhere, I guess the term is an Irish goodbye, is you just leave and don't say goodbye to anybody. You do that. It doesn't matter whether you're rude or not. If you got to get the hell out of Dodge to stay sober, you get the hell out of Dodge. Early on, I had to look this up of what I drank. The thing that kind of saved me early on were the San Pellegrino drinks with juice in them. They're these sparkling drinks. They must be loaded with sugar, but they have orange, they have lemon, and they are terrific. And when I first got sober, it's what I brought to events. And I will down like 10, 12 of these when I first got sober because I needed something.
Right.
I was lucky enough that I had a newborn at that time. We went to a graduation party, and there was a lot of drinking, people there who have problem drinking. And I used the baby as an excuse. Got to go, got to change a diaper. Got to go, got to feed the baby.
Right.
Because it got me away. And I told my wife, this is what I need to do. And she was good at it. You are very lucky that your wife offered to throw the booze away. Yeah. This is not the norm. And I know some people who came in, when I came in, who had spouses who were in active addiction and they were getting sober. I know of one guy who has been around the program for 20, 30 years. His wife has never stopped drinking and does a lot of drinking. And there are people who get sober through that. Mm-hmm. That's hard. I never had to experience it. My wife didn't offer. I came down one day and she was dumping some of her favorite sparkling wine. And I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, don't want to have it around. Right. And that was a wonderful act of love that she did for me. And I didn't ask for it, but it was the right thing to do at the time. Now, if there needs to be booze in the house now, it's not a problem, but I've been sober 9 years. Right. I've done the work. If you listen to us and you're like, well, why is it such a problem to me? I've been sober a month, 2 months. It's because you've been sober a month or 2 months. Don't compare. But this is the first boundary you got to set. If you got to get the hell out of there, if you got to throw away all the booze, you do whatever you need to do right now to stay sober. That's number one. I'll tell you another one that I struggled with, which was going to meetings and getting that permission to go to meetings, because my wife was not supportive at first, at least to the amount of meetings I was going to, and with the idea I would go to these meetings forever. And I had a newborn, and I had a 2-year-old, and 14 minus 9 is what, 5, 4 or 5? Yeah, 5. Young kids. She was pissed at me.
Absolutely.
And I struggled, and there are times I didn't go to meetings because she was pissed off. How do you set that boundary early on?
Well, that's a tough one. It really is, and I struggle with that. And this is no blame on anybody, because I talk about it a lot. But when I first came into the program, I came in '95. I had 2 small kids at home. I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And once I stopped drinking and I felt better, I truly thought that it was my job. I've talked about it on this podcast. I talk about it when I speak. I truly thought that it was my job to go home and be a dad, a husband. I started working, making money. Like, I thought that was what I was supposed to do. It was the wrong decision at the time. And what happened was my meetings started going down until they went to nothing. And then, it took me a long time. Story went on. 14 years later, I relapsed. But that's a tough one. Even today, right? Now, let me step back a little bit. That day that my wife offered to take all the booze out of the house was because she saw something different in me that she had never seen before. She saw total fear, right? Fear that and the words I told her, and this is important. And again, this is one of those things that I realized, like, wow, what happened that day? She came in, I was literally on the bed in a fetal position. I had called 2 people, my sponsor, my former sponsor, because I didn't have a sponsor at that point, and his sponsor. And she came in and I said, I just called 2 guys, and if either one of them call me back, I'm going to have them come get me. Right? There are 20 people in my backyard, and I was willing to leave because that's how shaken I was. And then I said to her these words, and these were the words that changed my life. I mean it. I'm an alcoholic, and I don't know how to fix it. I realized that at that point. That was my bottom at that point. I realized, like, oh, wait a minute. I really don't know what's going on here. And I think that shook her to her bones. And she's like, oh, this is different. This is not the confident, cocky guy that I know. This is somebody who's really beaten up. And I really did. I think she did it a little bit for self-preservation too. So that's that part of it. Even today, my wife doesn't love the fact that I have to spend as much time as I do in AA, going to meetings, going to function, doing the podcast, going to GS, going to district meetings, right? All that kind of stuff. Took a speaking commitment, right? I'm lucky I could speak during the day. Took a speaking commitment, 12 noon next Wednesday in Hartford, right? So, those are the things I do today to stay sober. So she'll say to me, like, oh, what's that, 6 AA things this week? And I'll go, yeah. Maybe it'll be 7. Sometimes I get fresh and like you keep talking, I'll make it 7 or 8 because I need that stuff. And I have to give it back. I have to try to make sure that, all those people who helped me out, that I can pay that back somehow.
I did another podcast before this one, and I started really podcasting in January 2019. She has never given me a hard time about the podcasting because she sees it as an outlet for me until it becomes unhealthy, and then she tells me to knock it off. I'm lucky there that we've gotten to the point where she understands there are certain outlets that if I'm allowed to have, I'm a lot easier to deal with. The podcast is one of those things that she allows me to do. I don't know if I had a bad day at work. I just had a bad mindset. There were a couple things that happened. I knew that this was coming, but it still bothered me overnight. There was this very important award at work that is given out. It's called a Circle of Success Award. And it was given to the team that handled new hire development. I was on this team. The team was nominated by somebody who, for whatever reason, didn't realize I was on the team. Mm-hmm. And so this entire team won this award, and I was on it, and I didn't. And nobody spoke up for me.
Ooh.
And that pissed me off. Yeah. Should I have spoken up earlier? Probably, but I didn't, because, sometimes in corporate, if you speak up, oh, you're just being a crybaby.
Right.
And so I really dealt with that for a couple months, and people were posting these things on LinkedIn. It pissed me off today. That set me off. And so I'm going to have a conversation with my boss about it to say, hey, this went on. It kind of pissed me off. What pissed me off was I wish somebody spoke up for me.
Right.
And not that somebody noticed, and that I don't have to be the person to have to speak up on something like that. It's not really fair. It's not the award. And this has happened to me like over and over again. I've been on these projects where everybody wins an award and I'm the one who doesn't.
Right. Listen, it's those things are tough. Those things when you're excluded. I'll just tell a really short story here. When I was first married, my former in-laws owned a beautiful place up in Maine, and my brother-in-law at the time was a salesman of boat parts, big boat parts and stuff like that, and would go around to all the different marinas, propellers, shafts, all kinds of supplies, all kinds of stuff. And there was a place in Maine, one of the places he went, which was really fairly well known at the time. One day he shows up at the house. My two brother-in-laws, there's three girls. So my two brother-in-laws, my father-in-law, and me, 4 guys were there, right? He walks in with 3 hats from this marina and gives them to everybody else except me.
What's that all about?
Right. What's that all about? And, it was like, oh, I didn't know you'd be here. Whatever it was, I'll just tell you, it's a huge punch in the gut. It's a huge punch in the gut. Like you said, when you're there, you were on that team, you deserved that award. But I never forgot that. I mean, I just felt like, exactly, what's that all about? Like, I mean, if I walk in and I see that, I don't give away hats at that point. You know what I mean? It's like, so anyway.
Yes.
But those are the type of things that they hurt. They hurt. And something, Matt, this is the beauty of it, right? If I don't think I was drinking at that time. I don't remember exactly. I'm pretty sure I wasn't drinking at that point. Matter of fact, I wasn't drinking. But if I was drinking, and if you were drinking, right, what would you do? It's the perfect excuse to go home and say, I'm going to throw back a few because I'm pissed off today.
Yes.
And I have this resentment, right? How can these people leave me out? And today we don't have to do that.
Yeah, I called my wife because what I did is I went to the gym. That's one of those things that I have set some boundaries around, that I go with my son. We go quite frequently, and my wife has been good at understanding there are some times I need to go there. But I got on the phone and I talked to her, and it kind of sounded like this.
Bullshit. 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 Fuck you.
She's like, are you going to go work out?
Yeah.
You think you'll feel better after working out?
Yeah. Hit the heavy bag a little bit?
I went and so I did some squats yesterday. I haven't done squats in the squat rack in a while. I'm struggling to walk today.
Yeah.
Today I did some chest exercises, and I did about 30 minutes, but at about 35 minutes, I just couldn't do one more tricep exercise. They were just burning. Like I couldn't lift my arms. So I went short, but I went heavy today. And I did. I felt a little bit better. There is that trigger with me that if I don't feel included and I don't feel something is fair, that is something that really fires me up. And yeah, it would have been a trigger to go drink in the past.
Absolutely.
Not today.
Absolutely. We don't need to do that. I mean, that's the beauty of the program, right? Is that we have these tools that we do not need to do that. And one of those is boundaries, right? One of those is, like you said, it's the boundaries. And it's like you said, some of these boundaries are home. Some of these we try to be fair to the people that we live with or the people that we're in relationships with. But there's even times where you just got to say, screw it. Like you said, like going to the gym was a great way to handle something like that. Just get that frustration out, push. I used to do that all the time. It's a great way to handle some frustration besides drinking.
I probably didn't take the amount of rest between sets that I probably needed to.
Yeah.
Because I was just push. And I was just so grateful I could get some of the equipment I could at the time I went, because it's a zoo there at that time. But I need to do those healthy things, need those outlets. I'm lucky I have a partner who understands that. And I had the time because she was taking the kids to go get their teeth cleaned. She went to the dentist. This reminds me of another boundary. I'm not always good at this, but I try to remember my own health. And I've set the boundary that I have to go to my doctor's appointments, and I have to call the dentist, and I have to call the eye doctor and do those things. And there have been periods of time where I have not been so good at that. I'd say within the last 5 years, I've really set those markers down. About since 2018, when my mother passed away, of going and taking care of my health. That is incredibly helpful for me. If you're sitting there and you've been sober for a while, if you're getting sober, that's something to overlook. I can call the doctor later for a routine appointment. It's not that big of a deal. You got to do that. You got to take care of your teeth. You got to take care of your health. If you need glasses, go to the eye doctor regularly. It's easy for me to push that off. And it's like, damn it, I'm going to prioritize this phone call, and I'm going to put it on the calendar. And there are times that it's during the workday, and I schedule myself out. I'm fortunate I have that ability.
Right.
But I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to apologize to my boss for it.
No, I learned long ago with some personal stuff that I have to take care of my health. I have, I don't know how much I've talked about it on this podcast, but, cancer has killed a bunch of my family members. I'm a recovering cancer patient. That was discovered because I listened to my doctor. It was discovered in a strange way. But my doctor just told me to go get an eye exam, just what you're talking about. And they found that I had a tumor in my eye. And only because I took care of my health is probably, I mean this honestly, it might be why I'm still alive today. Because I listened to my doctor and I took care of it. And it is so important to do that. And not only go to your doctor, but like you said, I'm glad, you're going to the gym. Hey, thank your son for that, right? Your son's the one who started that for you, encouraged you to do it, got you to go with him. It's just such a great thing to do. I mean, it's just one of those things. We need some physical exercise. We obviously need to eat as healthy as we possibly can. And then we need some type of, spiritual, if you will, or whatever it is, some type of intellectual outlet. I think that is a podcast for you, right? I think part of that, you doing a podcast, is a big outlet for you.
Yes.
And we need to take care of all those aspects in life to be healthy. And I'll just tell you something. When I neglect one of those, and part of it, I've been neglecting the physical part, partly because I had a foot in a boot. Not, there's other things I could have done for a long time, but I feel it now. I feel like my whole body aches because I'm just not doing enough. And I need to do more. I mean, I do plenty of work around here, but we got to take care of those. We got to find those boundaries. We got to find those limits, and we got to try to keep ourselves healthy.
This is something I talked to Mike about on the way out of the meeting, because we were talking a little bit about at the church, there's some sprucing up that they've done. It seems like progressive in the sense that it's a modern environment. In front of the door, they change it every once in a while. There's a sign there. They had a balloon drop for Easter. There are fun things that they do at this church to keep it modern. I'm a Roman Catholic. There is nothing creative. I told Mikey that creativity, the Catholic Church is where creativity goes to die.
Right.
And he talked about, I go to Catholic church every week. And I go, no, I know you do, Mike. And I told him, I admire you. And I'm envious. And he had told me, and this is really one of his boundaries. I didn't go for a while. I had trouble with belief, but I just felt it calling. I felt an emptiness inside. And that emptiness got filled by going to church each week. And I go to church and I feel something every time. And I told him, I am so envious of how you feel. And it is a reminder that Mike doesn't question this stuff. He doesn't overthink it.
He doesn't.
He felt the emptiness. He knew what to do. He did it.
Right.
Mike doesn't have a lot, but he's a lot more fulfilled than a lot of other people. I think he's fulfilled in many ways than I am.
Hey, and I'll tell you, I agree. I agree 100% with everything you just said about him. He is so comfortable there. We talk about it. I talk about it with him. Matter of fact, on the way into the meeting, he was asking me like, "Hey, do you believe in God?" And we got into this whole conversation. But he loves his church. He loves going. He gets a lot out of it, and it gives him peace. He tells me all the time, "Hey, I pray for you. I pray for your wife," and he
told me
means
he's gonna
it.
pray for me,
and he means it, and he will.
Yes.
He will pray for everybody. So it's just listen. It's what he does. I was brought up Roman Catholic too. It's not my gig anymore, but I've given Mike plenty of rights to church. His foot was in a boot for a long time. He broke his ankle, and it was in the middle of the winter. And I picked him up for months and drove him to church, dropped him off. It's not too far from my house, and I'd go back an hour later, and I'd pick him up and I'd bring him home. You know, that's his thing. It fulfills him. I'm happy to help him fulfill his life. So Mike's a great guy.
Once I know the format of the Catholic Church, the Catholic Mass, and I am just timing it out by where we are. When we get to like the Psalms, I know we're moving along. Get to the Alleluia. I know we're almost halfway done because we're at the homily. And once the homily is done, we're doing the Eucharist prayer. And once I've gotten through that Eucharist, I'm tapping my shoe. And sometimes I get really angry because there's like a couple people left to get communion, and the organist starts another song. Like if we had moved a little bit further, we would have been done. But now we have to get through another song.
All right.
And I'm done.
Usually they'll drop off a couple verses but you're right. They will keep playing until everybody's done.
Right. And he doesn't think that way. You know, he gets something out of it. I'm not in that place.
Right.
But it's clear that that's a boundary. And Mike doesn't believe in God. He knows God.
Right.
He knows there's a God.
Yep.
In his heart. And I am so envious of that.
Gets up. He's always talking, well, you know, it does his thing. Say my prayers every day. He does all his things. He's and like I said, he's a good guy. And I always tell him, you keep praying for me, Mike. You keep praying for me. I need it. Keep praying.
I need to remember all this stuff around boundaries because I am by nature a people pleaser. I don't like to say no. I want to say yes to everybody. I want everybody to like me. I don't want anybody to be disappointed by me.
Yeah.
And this is something where there's continuous work all the time.
I'm better at it today, but there was a time where I really struggled with that and got myself in a lot of bad situations because I was the same way. Hated to say no. Hated to disappoint. Still hate to disappoint people today, but I'm able to say no today. If you know, I actually know that sometimes, just like you said with the recovery podcast, sometimes no is the correct answer. Right? It's just the right answer for me and for lots of things.
I'm always asking at the end of these podcasts to send us a message, continue the conversation. I was on the Sober Motivation podcast a couple weeks ago, and I got blown away by people reaching out saying that my story connected with them. And, you know, if you find us on the charts, you'll find Sober Motivation by looking up. It's a pretty big podcast. And I was really overwhelmed. And I got one just by a regular listener, and I'm going to share this. I'm not giving too much of his information away, but this email really has stuck with me. Hey guys, I've been listening to your podcast now. My name is James. I'm 38 years sober. I'm exactly where Steve is in regards to believing in God. I was a born-again Christian when I first came into the program. I was quoting the Bible at meetings. I found such comfort in my faith in Jesus. This, many years later, I don't believe in God anymore, but I still pray. It's been a very deep habit to pray when I'm afraid, worried about loved ones, confused, and grateful. So I still do. It still feels comforting. I also still use my God box to write down a note of a situation I'm stressed about, date it, place it in a cookie jar, and then it's given to me by an elder AA friend who has passed that it was her God box. I don't think it's hypocritical because they say prayer doesn't change God. Prayer changes me. And it helps me continue praying to the universe, the power of love, or a tremendous group of invisible connections of like-mindedness evolving towards good. So there, I wish you had spoken more about what your use of your higher power is rather than how you define it. Like, how do you work your second step? What does it mean to turn your life over to that power? What are your priorities? What your priorities look like when you're practicing? I'm a night custodian who works alone. I listen to many podcasts. Yours makes me feel a little bit more connected to the program, hearing the same language. Thank you. This is
Thank you.
This was he said he bought Bill Shaberg's book and is really enjoying it. That episode was awesome. Trust me, that was awesome to do. I don't care if anybody listened to Bill Shaberg's episode.
Yeah.
It was awesome for me.
No, that was awesome. I'm so disappointed. Tony, why did you have to die? I missed it, but that was really nice. That was a nice thing, and yeah, we'll have to look at some of those suggestions of how to talk about it. It's interesting.
There's several episodes in this.
I just want to tell you something about that. Is that just happened to me, and it's interesting that he said that. What was his name again? I'm sorry.
James.
Just happened to me this week, James, is that when we closed our prayer and everybody said the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, I literally thought of the universe as I prayed it. It was the first time I did that. I literally thought of the stars and the sun and the skies and how it is. And it was the first time I'm like, yeah, I can still pray. I sort of just came to that conclusion. I can still pray to something different. Because that's something I struggled with, and he helped me. You just helped me, James. You just helped me.
I'm very humbled that when I'm doing tasks, I listen to a lot of podcasts at work when I'm doing certain things that I got to dial into, a lot of them being mundane tasks. And it just, to me, it's the ultimate compliment that you've let us into your ears at that moment when you're doing those things. Yeah. To me, it's like when you're inviting a podcast, the rotation of podcasts that I have that I bring to work or when I'm walking or working out or wherever, those people are like family to me in a sense. Like I feel like I know those people, the ones I listen all the time.
Yeah.
And to be allowed in like that means the most. So that email, and I got a lot of emails recently, that one meant the most. And I'm looking at him like, he's right. There's a lot of topics here that we can cover. So we're going to do that for you. Steve, always good to see you. Always a good episode.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. And hope you enjoyed it. Hope you are setting good boundaries for yourself. And if you're not, keep practicing. It's okay to fail as long as you're learning from them. Bye, everybody. See you next week. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.